So my goal is to give you a sense of what this model is all about, this decision support model, and some intuition for the results that we're seeing. So there's been some interesting research conducted over the past 20 years that's shown that we aren't very good at intuiting how dynamic systems behave. What do I mean by dynamic systems? I just mean that there are a set of factors that determine the outcome or the set of outcomes that we care about, and both are changing over time, often with delays between changes and the effects that they trigger. The topic of much of this research on how well we make decisions, supply chains are a great example of a dynamic system. So consider, for example, that you're sitting in the middle of a production and distribution chain that gets medication to patients when they need it. When trying to control a supply chain, when you're sitting in the middle of it, you want to have enough stock on hand to meet demand, but not too much, because that often comes at a cost, especially if we're talking about medications that have a short shelf life. So unaided, we're really terrible at deciding when to reorder and how much to reorder. We often end up over ordering and under ordering, fairly wildly oscillating around what would be a better decision. So another example of dynamic systems is what we're here to talk about today, what I would call queuing systems. Queuing systems describe processes of waiting for and being served. We describe a queuing system by breaking it into 3 parts. The first part is the arrival process. It describes how people arrive to be served. We often talk about, as Doris did, how many people arrive to be served per day, week, month. It depends on how fast the system's working. Second, we describe the service process. So what does service entail? Is it one process or a series of processes? How long does each take? How many servers are there? Who goes to which one? In some queuing systems, servers are people. In our competency restoration example, the constraining factor here is often staffed beds. So we're going to consider those to be our servers. Finally, the third part of describing a queuing system is we describe the rules about how people wait. Typically, we talk about first in, first out. The longer you wait, the sooner you are going to get in. But it's not always the way it is. So sometimes people keep waiting. We wonder whether people keep waiting until they get in or not. Do they leave the queue? In our case, they're going to stay in the queue in jails. So these systems don't behave in a linear manner. Adding a server doesn't confer a fixed impact on wait times. It matters where you are, what your system looks like. So our intuition about how to fine-tune systems with too much waiting is often totally wrong. Decision support models can help. And basically what they do is simulate the parts, which can be studied and grounded in data, and our rules or assumptions about how things work. So how people arrive, what the service process looks like, and how people wait. The model is tracking what happens in terms of how long people have to wait, how busy servers are we using the servers that we have efficiently, and how much does it cost to run our system. Once we build a model of the current system, what we often call our status quo, we can use the model to test scenarios for change. What if service times were a little bit lower? What if demand was a little bit lower, if we could meet people's needs elsewhere and divert them from needing this service? What if we had an extra server? So I'm going to show you several examples of simulation models running right now, because I think this is the best way to give you an intuition for what's going on in these models. There's no magic, I promise. So let's start with the first video. Here, we're simulating a simple system, say a fast food restaurant, healthy, of course. One customer arrives every minute. They get into a single line and wait for the first available server to order and pay. No one leaves without ordering. It takes approximately 3.8 minutes on average for service. There are 4 servers. In this version of the system, the average customer is in the system, that's the total of waiting and being served, for a bit under 20 minutes. That means with just 4 minutes of time, just a little bit less than 4 minutes of time being served, they're waiting 15 to 16 minutes. If you run this model over and over, because there's randomness in here, the average time in the system varies between 18 and 22 minutes. So let's cue the second video. What would it take to make things better? The model offers us a chance to try out different scenarios before committing, before investing in change and learning the longer way. What if we add another server? Now we're looking at two versions of the system running at the same time. In both, customers arrive about every minute, one customer about every minute, and service still takes 3.8 minutes. The only change is that one of the versions has 4 servers, our current system, and the other has 5. You can see the servers are the little people. We can see how much of an impact this change has on customer wait time. Instead of spending 22 minutes in the system, they spend 5. Remember, 3.8 minutes of which is service time. So that means the average wait is less than 90 seconds in the case with 5 servers. Adding another server here is very efficient. Servers keep busy, and the lines were long before, so adding another server pulled a lot of people out of that line and got them service faster. So let's cue the third video. But since we're invested in since we've invested in building this decision support model, let's keep going and look at other possible change scenarios. Adding servers isn't always the only or even the best solution. So maybe someone has a clever idea, in this case, that would cut service time down to 2 minutes, say. Maybe they figured out that the menu wasn't very visible from the back of the line, and so people didn't really figure out what they wanted until they got up to order. Or maybe there was some clever idea to help them order on an iPad back in the back of the line, or just some way to make service more efficient. Okay, so let's compare the current system to this new version of the system. Here again, we're simulating 2 versions. Customer arrives about every 1 minute in both, and there are 4 servers in both. So the only difference is that the service time, okay, in our comparison scenario is now 2 minutes instead of 3.8 minutes. Without having to add another server, we managed to almost completely eliminate the wait time. So remember, the service time is 2 minutes, so time in system is just a little bit over 2 minutes in our service system with the lower service times as compared to our base case, where patients are waiting about 16 minutes. Okay, let's cue video 4 in our last video. I said before that things aren't always linear. The effect of adding a bed isn't always the same. So let's look at that, how that can be. So now we have 2 versions of the system. Okay, now we're going to consider that we make both changes. So one version of the system has, on the top, has 4 servers. The service time is 2 minutes. On the bottom, we have 5 servers and a service time of 2 minutes. Okay, so what we see here, and again, as always, one person's arriving per minute. What we see here is that adding that extra bed really doesn't do anything to the waiting time. It might reduce it 1/10 of a minute. Okay? And that's because the system is functioning differently. There aren't as many people in line to pull off. So where you are in the system, how your system's behaving matters in terms of what you get for changing the system in different ways. So that's really all there is to queuing models. We study and simulate service systems so that we can learn with them how changes in that system are going to affect outcomes that we care about. Models are the simplified versions of the world. Of course, they're approximations, but they are a great starting point. So if assumptions, if the simulated behavior doesn't match our actual system behavior, right, then that would prompt us to want to try to question the model. What assumptions that we have made are not accurate, need to be revised, so that we ultimately want to do is move towards simulating a system, a version of the system that's realistic enough to guide our decision making. Making decisions like this, using decision support models, can help us make more efficient use of limited resources. Modeling is relevant to a slew of intractable problems, for which decision making is more akin, these days, to throwing darts blindfolded. Not only can models like this aid our faulty intuition, but they offer a concrete business case for change. Models can also help stakeholders learn and come to an agreement, a common shared understanding of what better changes might look like. So, in my experience, we found modeling like this to be a very good way to get people together to reach a consensus. It's far more efficient to experiment with a simulation model than in the real world.